He followed the soft moans under the pine, found her wounded and pledged to keep her breathing. The forest had always been quiet in a way that helped him think. That afternoon, he walked along the narrow trail with slow steps, letting the steady crunch of dry needles under his boots calm his thoughts. Tall pine trees stood like silent guards on both sides, their long branches swaying gently as the wind moved through them. Sunlight slipped through the gaps above, falling in broken patches on the ground. He had come here to clear his mind, nothing more. No plans, no rush, just a simple walk before evening. He checked his watch and guessed he still had enough daylight to finish the loop and return to his car. The air smelled fresh and clean, and for a moment, everything felt balanced. His breathing matched his pace, and his thoughts finally slowed. It was the kind of peace that only came when the world felt far away. Then he heard something that did not belong. At first, it was so faint that he thought it was the wind moving oddly through the trees. He stopped walking and listened. The forest settled again into silence, broken only by birds calling in the distance. He shook his head and took another step forward. That was when he heard it again. A low, uneven sound drifted through the air. It was not loud, but it carried a weight that made his chest tighten. It sounded human. Not a shout, not a call for help, but something softer, something strained. The sound rose and fell like someone struggling to breathe or speak. He stood frozen, listening carefully. His heart began to beat faster. The trail around him was empty. No signs, no voices, no movement. Just trees, shadows, and that sound. 1,000 thoughts rushed through his mind. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe someone was camping nearby. Maybe he was imagining it. He had heard stories of people panicking over harmless noises in the woods. He did not want to be one of them. Still, the sound came again. This time it was clearer. It was pain. He felt a wave of unease mixed with something stronger, responsibility. If someone was hurt out here, walking away would mean leaving them alone. But going off the trail carried its own risks. People got lost. People got hurt. He knew that. He took a slow breath and tried to calm himself. He reminded himself to think clearly. He pulled his phone from his pocket and checked the screen. The signal was weak, just one bar, but it was there. That gave him a small sense of comfort. Carefully, he stepped off the trail. The ground immediately felt different under his feet. Loose soil, roots, and fallen branches made every step uncertain. He moved slowly, following the direction of the sound. He did not call out at first. He did not want to scare anyone or anything. The noise grew slightly louder as he moved forward. It led him toward a cluster of pine trees that stood closer together than the rest. Their branches formed a darker space beneath them where sunlight barely reached. He paused again, scanning the area. "Hello?" he finally called, keeping his voice steady. The sound stopped. His stomach tightened. He waited, hoping for a response. Seconds passed. Then, from under the trees, the sound returned, shorter this time, weaker. He moved closer, his steps slow and careful. As he reached the edge of the shaded area, he saw her. She was lying on the ground beneath a large pine, partially covered by fallen needles and broken twigs. Her clothes were dusty, and one leg was bent at an unnatural angle. Her face was pale, and her eyes were half open, unfocused. A small trail of blood darkened the ground near her side. For a moment he could not move. This was real. This was not a story or a sound misheard. This was a person, injured and alone in the forest. He knelt beside her, keeping a small distance at first. He did not know what had happened or how badly she was hurt. He noticed the rise and fall of her chest. It was shallow but steady. "Can you hear me?" he asked gently. Her eyes shifted slightly and her lips moved. No words came out, but the sound returned, quieter than before. He felt a rush of relief. She was alive. He introduced himself slowly, even though he was not sure she understood. He kept his voice calm and low, the way he imagined a steady voice should sound in moments like this. He did not want to frighten her or cause more stress. He looked around, trying to understand what might have happened. The ground nearby sloped downward, and broken branches suggested someone might have slipped or fallen. There was no sign of anyone else. No bag, no clear path. "How long have you been here?" he asked. She blinked slowly. Her breathing became uneven and she turned her head slightly as if trying to focus on him. Her lips moved again. "Don't try to talk," he said quickly, realizing it might be too much for her. "Just stay with me. You're not alone." He remembered reading that warmth could help someone in shock. His hands trembled slightly, but he forced himself to slow down. He checked his phone again. The signal flickered. He tried to call for help, but the call did not go through. He clenched his jaw, fighting the fear rising in his chest. He looked back at her. Leaving her to find better signal crossed his mind, but the idea felt wrong. What if she stopped breathing while he was gone? What if she became unconscious? He did not know how long help would take, but he knew one thing clearly: he could not abandon her. He stayed close, speaking to her in short, calm sentences. He told her where she was. He told her that help would come. He told her to focus on breathing, to stay awake. She made a faint sound in response, as if she heard him. Minutes passed slowly. The forest felt different now. The peace he had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a heavy stillness. Every sound seemed louder. Every movement of air felt important. He watched her chest rise and fall, counting each breath quietly in his head. He noticed how her breathing changed when she became too still and gently spoke again to bring her attention back. "You're doing well," he said. "Just keep breathing. I'm here." He did not know her name. He did not know her story. But right there under the pine tree, those details did not matter. What mattered was that she was breathing. And as long as she was, he promised himself he would stay, no matter how long it took. He stayed beside her, careful not to move her more than necessary. The ground beneath them was uneven and cold, but he did not notice the discomfort. All his attention was on her face, her breathing, the small signs that told him she was still holding on. The forest, once calming, now felt watchful, as if everything around them had paused to see what he would do next. He took another look at her injuries. One leg was clearly hurt, and there was a dark stain spreading slowly near her side. He did not touch the wound directly, afraid of causing more harm. Instead, he used part of his shirt to gently press near the area, hoping it might help slow the bleeding without hurting her. He did it carefully, speaking to her the whole time so she would not feel sudden fear. "I'm right here," he said softly. "You're not alone. Just stay with me." They did not fully focus, but they reacted to his voice. That gave him strength. It told him she could still hear, still sense that someone was there. He checked his phone again and tried calling emergency services. The call failed once more. Frustration rose in his chest, but he forced it down. Panic would not help her. He switched to messages, typing quickly with shaking fingers, sending his location to anyone who might receive it. The message showed it was trying to send, then stopped. He looked around, thinking carefully. The trail was not far, but the trees made the distance feel longer. If he left her to search for better signal, even for a short time, anything could happen. She could lose consciousness. Her breathing could weaken. The idea of returning to find her silent filled him with fear. He made a decision then, firm and clear. He would stay. He adjusted his position so he could sit closer without touching her injuries. He used his backpack as a support for his back and pulled his jacket tighter around her shoulders. The temperature was dropping as evening approached, and he knew cold could make things worse. He spoke to her again, this time asking simple questions. "Can you move your fingers?" he asked gently. There was a slight movement, just enough to show effort. "That's good," he said, even though the movement was small. "You're doing great." He chose his words carefully, speaking slowly, leaving pauses between sentences. He told her about the trail, about the trees, about the sound of the wind above them. He talked as if describing ordinary things could keep her connected to the moment. After a while, she tried to speak. Her lips moved and a faint sound escaped. He leaned closer. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to talk. Just breathe." He realized he needed to prepare for the possibility that help would take a long time. He thought about what he could do. He checked her breathing again, counting softly. He watched her chest rise and fall, steady but shallow. He placed 2 fingers near her wrist, unsure if he was doing it right, but he felt a weak pulse. That small beat beneath his fingers gave him hope. "You're still here," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. At one point, her breathing slowed and her eyes began to close fully. Fear shot through him. "Hey," he said gently but firmly. "Stay with me. Open your eyes." It reminded him that she was not just someone injured in the woods. She was a person with a life, a story, people who might be waiting for her. Her eyes opened slightly again. "That's it," he said, just like that. It seemed to help. Her breaths became a little more even. The ground beneath him was growing cold, and his legs were starting to ache, but he did not move. Every discomfort felt unimportant compared to the fragile life beside him. He reminded himself that staying calm was part of helping her survive. He tried his phone again, moving it slightly higher, stretching his arm upward as far as he could. A single bar appeared. He quickly dialed, holding his breath. This time the call connected. His voice shook as he spoke, but he forced himself to stay clear and steady. He explained where he was, what he had found, and the condition she was in. He followed the instructions given to him carefully, answering questions, describing the surroundings, the trail, the trees. When the call ended, he felt both relief and fear. Help was on the way, but it would take time. The terrain was difficult and night was approaching. He told her that help was coming, even though he was not sure she fully understood. He believed hearing it mattered. "They're coming for you," he said. "Just keep breathing." How close he had been to continuing his walk, finishing his loop, going home. The thought made his chest feel tight. He stayed with her, fully aware that this choice, to stop, to listen, to stay, had placed him in the most important moment of his life. And until help arrived, his only promise was simple and unbreakable. He would keep her breathing. The night settled slowly around them, not all at once, but in layers. First, the colors faded from the forest. The greens turned dark, the browns deepened, and the sky above the trees became heavy and gray. Then the air grew colder. He felt it on his hands, his face, and finally in his bones. Still, he did not move away from her. He stayed focused on the simple things, her breathing. The sound of it, the rhythm, in and out, in and out. As long as that continued, there was hope. He remembered the voice on the phone telling him to keep her warm, to keep her awake if possible, to watch for any changes. He replayed those instructions in his mind again and again, afraid he might forget something important. He spoke to her softly, even when she did not respond. He talked about ordinary things, things that felt safe. He described the trail he had been walking on, the tall pine trees above them, the way the wind moved through the branches. He spoke slowly, clearly, giving her something to hold on to. Sometimes her eyes opened. Sometimes they stayed closed. Each time they closed for too long, fear rose in his chest, and he gently called her name again. "Stay with me," he said more than once. "Just breathe, that's all you need to do." Not much, but enough. He felt a quiet sense of relief, though it never fully settled. He knew things could change at any moment. Injuries were unpredictable. Time could be cruel. His legs were numb from sitting still for so long, but he shifted only slightly, careful not to disturb her. He used his backpack to shield part of her body from the cold ground, placing it gently where it would not cause pain. He wrapped his jacket tighter around her shoulders and chest, making sure she was covered as much as possible. The forest at night felt different. Sounds that once seemed harmless now felt louder, closer. A branch snapping in the distance made his heart jump. The rustle of leaves made him glance around, alert and tense. Still, nothing approached. The forest remained quiet, watching. He reminded himself that rescue teams knew where they were now. They were coming. He repeated that thought whenever doubt crept in. She stirred slightly and made a faint sound. He leaned closer. "It's okay," he said. "You're doing great." Minutes passed, then more minutes. Time lost its meaning. He measured it only by her breathing and the slow movement of the sky above them. At some point, he felt his own energy begin to fade. His body wanted rest. His mind wanted relief. But he did not allow himself to relax fully. He stayed alert, knowing that staying awake was part of keeping her alive. He thought about his life before this moment, the small problems he had carried into the forest with him earlier that day. They now felt distant, almost unreal. None of them mattered anymore. Everything had narrowed down to this single task: keep her breathing. Her breathing changed again, becoming slower, more uneven. Panic flashed through him, but he controlled it. He leaned in close, placing his hand near her shoulder so she could feel his presence. "Listen to me," he said calmly. "You're safe right now. Help is coming." He stayed like that, repeating the same calm instructions, the same reassuring words, even if they felt repetitive. He understood now that repetition could be grounding. Familiar words could anchor someone when everything else felt uncertain. At one moment, her eyes opened fully for the first time. They focused on him just for a second. In that brief connection, he saw fear, confusion, and something else: trust. That look stayed with him. "I'm here," he said quietly. "I won't leave." He adjusted the jacket again and leaned closer, using his own body heat as much as he could. He listened for any sign of rescue, any distant sound, any movement that did not belong to the forest. Every few minutes he paused his talking just to listen. Nothing yet. Still, he stayed. At one point his phone vibrated weakly. His heart jumped. It was a brief message confirming that help was still on the way. Terrain was slowing them down. They asked him to stay where he was. He whispered the news to her, hoping it reached her even if she did not respond. "They're coming," he said. "You just have to hold on a little longer." He understood that survival often depended on moments like this, moments where someone chose patience over panic, care over fear. He watched her chest rise again and again. Each breath felt like a promise. As the night deepened, he stayed beside her, grounded by the sound of her breathing and the knowledge that, in this dark forest, staying present mattered more than anything else. And until help arrived, he remained exactly where he was, counting breaths, speaking softly, and holding onto hope one moment at a time. The hours felt heavier as the night moved forward. The forest was now fully dark, wrapped in silence broken only by the wind and the soft sound she made while breathing. He could no longer see the details of her face clearly, but he could sense her presence beside him. He stayed close, using his voice as a guide, a reminder that she was not alone in the dark. His body was tired. His back ached and his legs were stiff from sitting so long on the cold ground. Still, he did not complain, not even in his thoughts. Pain felt small compared to what she was going through. He reminded himself again that discomfort could be ignored, but fear could not be allowed to grow. He kept checking her breathing. Sometimes it was steady, sometimes uneven. Each change made his heart race, but he learned to respond calmly. He adjusted his tone, slowed his speech, and guided her back into a steady rhythm. He had never imagined that something as simple as breathing could become the center of everything. The forest seemed endless at night. The trees stood tall and dark, their shapes blending together. He could not see the trail anymore, only shadows and outlines. The world felt reduced to a small circle around them, as if everything beyond that space had disappeared. He spoke to her again, softly. "You're doing well," he said. "Just keep breathing with me." The warmth of her hand when he gently held it to keep it from getting too cold. At some point he heard a faint sound in the distance. It was barely noticeable at first, like a low hum carried by the wind. He stopped talking and listened closely. His heart began to beat faster. The sound faded, then returned. It could have been anything: wind, a distant animal. His hope rose, then hesitated. He had been waiting so long that he did not want to disappoint himself. He stayed quiet, listening. Then he heard it again. This time it was clearer. A distant engine, not close but real. Relief washed over him, so strong it almost made him weak. He resisted the urge to shout. He did not want to waste energy or frighten her. Instead, he leaned closer and spoke softly. "I hear them," he said. "They're close." Still, the knowledge that help was near gave him renewed strength. He stayed alert, listening carefully. Every few minutes he called out calmly, giving their location without shouting too much. He did not want to strain his voice. He balanced between being heard and staying steady. When he heard voices for the first time, his chest tightened with emotion. Real voices, clear and human. "Over here," he called, his voice firm but controlled. Lights appeared between the trees, moving slowly, carefully. The beams cut through the darkness, bouncing off branches and tree trunks. He shielded her eyes gently when the light came closer. Rescue workers reached them at last. They moved with calm confidence, speaking clearly, asking questions, checking her condition. He answered everything he could, his voice finally shaking now that he knew he was no longer alone. They praised him quietly for staying with her, for keeping her warm and alert. He barely heard the words. His focus remained on her as they worked, adjusting equipment, stabilizing her carefully. One of them placed a blanket over her, thicker and warmer than his jacket. Another checked her breathing and nodded slightly. That nod felt like a gift. They lifted her gently onto a stretcher, moving slowly to avoid causing pain. He stood back only when they asked him to, his body suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. His hands trembled now that the responsibility was no longer only his. As they prepared to carry her through the forest, she stirred slightly. Her eyes opened for a brief moment and she looked toward him. The light reflected in her eyes, tired but aware. He leaned closer so she could hear him. "You're safe now," he said softly. Her lips moved, and though her voice was barely there, he understood the meaning. Gratitude, relief. The rescue team moved carefully through the trees, guiding the stretcher along a narrow path they had cleared. He followed behind for a short distance, watching until the lights disappeared into the darkness. When they were gone, the forest felt strangely empty. He stood there for a moment, unsure what to do next. The quiet returned, but it felt different now. Lighter, as if the forest had released something it had been holding. Eventually, he made his way back to the trail. Each step felt slow and heavy. His body was tired, but his mind was awake, filled with images from the night. The sound of her breathing, the look in her eyes, the moment he heard the engine in the distance. By the time he reached his car, the sky was beginning to lighten slightly. Morning was not far away. He sat for a long moment before starting the engine, resting his head against the seat. He felt empty and full at the same time, exhausted but calm. He did not know what would happen to her next. He did not know her full story or if their paths would ever cross again, but he knew something important. In the darkest hours of the night, when fear and doubt could have taken over, he had chosen to stay, to listen, to care. And sometimes that choice was enough to change everything. As he drove away, the forest faded behind him, quiet once more. But the memory of that night stayed with him, steady and clear, a reminder that even in silence, small actions could carry great weight. Days passed after that night, but the memory did not fade. It stayed with him in quiet moments, returning when he least expected it. When he woke in the morning, he sometimes thought he could still hear the forest, the wind, the leaves, and most of all, the sound of breathing that had guided him through the dark hours. Life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. He went back to work, answered messages, and followed his usual routine. To anyone watching from the outside, nothing seemed different. But inside, something had changed. He noticed things more now, small details, the sound of someone laughing nearby, the way sunlight fell across the floor. Even the simple act of breathing felt more meaningful. He wondered about her often. He did not know where she was recovering or how serious her injuries had been in the end. He only knew that she had been alive when they carried her away, and that knowledge brought him quiet comfort. Sometimes he imagined her waking up in a safe place, surrounded by people who cared for her. Other times, he reminded himself not to imagine too much. Some questions did not need answers. A week later, he received a call from an unfamiliar number. For a moment, he hesitated before answering. When he did, a calm voice spoke his name. The caller explained they were following up on the incident in the forest. They confirmed that the woman had survived and was recovering steadily. Her injuries had been serious, but she had received help in time. The caller thanked him for staying with her, for keeping her calm and breathing until help arrived. He listened quietly, feeling a mix of relief and emotion rise in his chest. When the call ended, he sat still for a long moment, letting the news settle. She was alive. That was enough. Later that day, he went for a walk, not in the forest this time, but along a familiar street. The world felt different now, softer somehow. He realized that he no longer rushed through his thoughts the way he used to. He took his time. He paid attention. He thought about how easily that moment could have been missed, how close he had been to ignoring the sound and continuing his walk. The idea unsettled him, not with guilt but with awareness. Life, he realized, often turned on the smallest decisions. Weeks passed. One afternoon he received a short message. It was from her. She did not write much. She did not need to. She thanked him for staying, for not leaving, for helping her through the worst hours of her life. She said she did not remember everything clearly, but she remembered his voice. She remembered the calm in it. She remembered breathing because someone had reminded her to. He read the message more than once. He replied simply. He told her he was glad she was recovering. He wished her well. There were no big words, no dramatic expressions. None were needed. They exchanged a few messages after that, spaced far apart. Nothing intense, just small updates. Simple kindness. Eventually, the messages stopped, not because of distance or discomfort, but because both of them understood something important. That moment under the pine tree belonged to its time. It did not need to become anything else. As months passed, the memory settled into something quieter. It no longer carried fear or urgency. Instead, it became a reminder, a steady presence in the back of his mind. He returned to the forest once, long after everything had ended. Not to relive the moment, but to walk again, to feel the ground beneath his feet and the air around him. He stood near the trail, listening. The forest sounded the same as it always had, wind through branches, distant birds, soft movement in the leaves. But he was not the same. He paused where he thought it had happened, though he could not be sure of the exact spot. Pine needles still covered the ground. The trees still stood tall and silent. There was no sign of what had taken place there, and somehow that felt right. Life moved forward. From time to time, he found himself helping in small ways. Not because he felt like a hero, but because he understood now how much small actions mattered. Holding a door, listening longer, checking in, staying present. He did not tell many people about that night. Not because it was a secret, but because it felt personal. It was not a story meant for attention. It was simply something that had happened, something that had changed him quietly. On difficult days, when stress returned or doubts crept in, he reminded himself of one simple truth he had learned in the forest. You do not always need to know what to do next. Sometimes you just need to stay. Stay calm. Stay kind. Stay present. He had followed a sound that day without knowing where it would lead. He had stayed when it would have been easier to leave. And in doing so, he had witnessed something powerful, not drama, not bravery, but the quiet strength of human care. Under a pine tree in a dark forest, two strangers had shared a moment that neither would forget. One fought to stay alive. The other chose not to walk away. And sometimes that choice, to listen, to stay, to help someone keep breathing, is enough to make all the difference.